Okay, let's pick up Kuf Pei Gimel. HaMitzvah Sholosh U'Shmona Mumeya Hi Shetzivonu Loses LaLevim Om LaSheves, to give them a place to live. Om LaSheves. Ke'ein lahem chelik b'aretz, so they have to have a place to live. So Loses LaLevim Om LaSheves Ke'ein lahem chelik b'aretz. So l'cheira it's mefurish that the mitzvah of Nesinas Ori Levim to Levim is a tmura, is an exchange, is because she'ein LaLevim chelik b'aretz. It is true that the Rambam in the Protei Mitzvos writes something like this, but I think it has nothing to do. The Rambam in Hilchos Shmita B'Yovel writes shelo yinchal kol shevet Levi be'eretz Yisrael. There's a law of nachla. Elonoisen lehem oim matana lasheves bohem. It only is explanation of why you don't violate the law with the Ori Levim. But it has nothing to do with our discussion, whether it's because they have a chelik or not a chelik. However, the Rambam Mishnah Torah falls off this. And he's of the opinion that the Ori Levim are not a tmura for the fact that they don't have Yusha B'aretz, but just the opposite. It's a chiddush that even though they have no Cheli B'aretz, still they have Om L'Sheves B'hem. And the fact that they ain't no Cheli B'aretz should have been a stira. And maybe that's what he's saying over here, that it's not a stira to the lav. Shalom call Shevet Levi, maybe it's exactly like the Protei Mitzvos. And that's what he says in Perek Yigim Aloch Aleph, Shevet Levi, Afa Pi She'ein Lehem Chelik B'aretz, Fad Nitztav Yisrael Liten Afa Pi She'ein Lehem Chelik B'aretz, so they shouldn't get anything. Nitztavu Yisrael Litein Lohem Oim L'Sheves V'Gusheim V'Oim Em Sheisha Oim Miklot V'Aleim Shtayim V'Aboim Il. So that's just the first point in the Ram over here. V'Omroi Yis'aleh, and what's the mitzvah? V'Nos L'Lavim V'goymer Om L'Sheves. V'elu hayoros gam kein v'atzeloi ma'ori alevim heim miklot v'koltos. The Rambam mentions over here there's not only a mitzvah of Nesinas or Levim, but these orim are koilet. So l'cheira, since the Rambam mentions it over here, that this klita, the fact that this klita in the Ori Levim is part of this mitzvah. Otherwise, why is he mentioning it over here? And then we understand the Seder of the Rambam. He mentions this mitzvah after Ori Miklot, because this is also a type of Ori Miklot. Then the Rambam continues. Ori miklot v'koltos al toya miyuchad. Al toya miyuchad. There's a very special way that they kolet, not the general way, and that the Rambam says in Hilchos Shmiras Nefesh Perek Ches Halacha Yud. Uma hefresh yesh bein ori miklot shehuvdelu lemiklot. The Ori Miklot, the Etzem HaFrosh is a Miklot, who made Shar Orim, that the Etzem HaFrosh who wasn't the Miklot was for Levim. Shori Miklot Koltos Bein Ladas, Bein Shalodas. However Nichos Behen. If the Rotzeh comes in, whether he wanted the klita doesn't make a difference, or he knows he's coming in, it's all irrelevant. The shal or the vim ain't koltus el ladas. V'rotzeh hador b'oi miklot eno noisit schar beisai. He doesn't have to pay rent. V'ador b'shal or the vim noisit schar lebalabais. Those are the two differences. Now, let's now try to understand what we have. We had last week a mitzvah of Ori Miklot, and we have a mitzvah of Hafrosha Ori Levim. And both of them are koltes. So the question is, why are they two mitzvahs in minyan mitzvahs? So I would have said, in minyan mitzvahs, the ika mitzvah from Ori Miklot is klita and atzolas makin nefesh b'shkoga. In fact, he doesn't mention anything about Ori Levim, that it is an Ori Levim, is one of the Ori Levim, or they are 6 Ori Levim. He doesn't mention that in the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is, and that's the Ika mitzvah, Hatzolas Make Nefesh B'Shkoga. And since the Ika mitzvah is Miklot, so the Achonas Drochim, and that Ram has discussion that they should be able to get there fast, and all the dinim is part of the mitzvah. In Ori Levim, the Ika mitzvah is that they're Levim. So here, the Ika mitzvah Levim, therefore it's a separate mitzvah. And that's why he's going out of his way at the beginning of the mitzvah to explain why they are Levim. Ki ein lem chelik ba'aretz. And that's the explanation, because he's trying to explain the Ika mitzvah. The fact that they're koltes is not the Ika mitzvah. Therefore, there's no din hachona by the Ori Levim. And therefore, they're two mitzvahs, minyan mitzvahs. The Ika mitzvah of Ori Miklot is klita, and the Ika mitzvah of Ori Levim is a tmura she'en lem chelik ba'aretz. However, the interesting thing here is the Rambam in Mishnah Torah has a whole different approach to these two mitzvahs, and possibly why they are two separate mitzvahs in the minyan. There's one mitzvah in minyan mitzvahs of nesinas orim la'levim l'shebes, to give the ori la'levim a place to live. And that the Rambam discussed in Hilchos Shmita B'Yovel. And in these Ori Levim is also included the Ori Miklot. And this has nothing to do with the fact that they're kolled. There's a mitzvah of Nesinas Orim Levim, and there's altogether 48 cities. And therefore, in Hilchos Shmita V'Yovel, the Rambam does not mention anything about klita. In Perek Yud Gimel Halacha Aleph, Shevi Levi Afal Pi She'en Lehem Chelik Ba'aretz, V'Nitztavu Yisrael Litem Lehem Orim L'Sheves U'Migusheim, V'Orim Mehem Sheish Orim Miklot, V'Aleim Shtayim V'Arboyim Ir. And interesting, he mentions the Sheish Ori Miklot as Ori Leviim even before he mentions the Shtayim ve'Arboim Ir. So there's one mitzvah of Nesinas Orim LeLeviim, and it includes the Ori Miklot and the Ori Leviim. There's another mitzvah to set up Orim Lekritas Leitzech B'Shoigeg. It happens to be that the mitzvah is miskayemes with the same Orim, which are Orim for Leviim. But that's a coincidence. The Ram in Hilchos Leitzech Shmiras HaNefesh, Periches Halacha Aleph, Beis and Tes. Mitzvahs Aseh lahafrish Orim Miklot. Shenema Sholish Orim Tavdaloch. The ain Orim Miklot nohegis ela be'eretz Yisrael. V'sheish Orim hoyu. V'chulei. Kol Orei HaLeviim koltes. V'chol achas mehen ir miklotu. Kol achas mehen is called an ir miklot. Shenem v'aleim titnu arboim u'shtayim ir. Kol ehorim, heorim asher titnu la'leviim arboim shmona ir. Hikishin hakosu kulan zel lezeh liklot. So it's interesting. At the beginning, he says Shenema Sholish Orim Tavdaloch on top of the three. So you should say that the Orim do the mitzvah. And then he says no. That since it's a hekesh that they correlate, so it's also part of the mitzvah. It's an amazing thing. The same pasuk, V'aleim titnu arboim u'shtayim ir, seems to be for the mitzvah of Ori Miklot is Ori Leviim, and Ori Leviim, that they correlate in part of the mitzvah of Ori Miklot. But you understand yourself that the Pshuta Shel Mikra, V'aleim titnu arboim u'shtayim ir, kol orim asher titnu leviim. So, ikishim akosu kulon zola zola klikloi, that the whole din klita is only because of a hekish. And the hekish, derech a hekish, we include ori leviim in the mitzvah. There seems to be, he doesn't stress that there's a Pirush Mukubal over here. Just say Kishim HaKosov, Kulon, Zol Lezol, Liklite. So it's interesting. It's only a drosha b'alma, it's a hekish. As the Rambam puts together, hekish in Shurish Beis, he says you can't have a minyan mitzvahs hekish or you give them midas. So what's going on over here? So what I would suggest over here is Biskarov in Hilchos Machos Asuris suggests when he's talking about the difference between the mitzvah of Oinain and Orel, he suggests, he seems to hold like that through Midas HaTorah, even though you can't make a mitzvah minyan on mitzvahs, but you can expand the mitzvah which already exists. And since it's a mitzvah which exists, which is Hafrosh Ori Miklot, you can expand the mitzvah derech hekish to include the other 42 cities. And that's what's happening over here. So you understand that the Ika mitzvah is lahafish ori miklot, and because of the hekish, you're machir the mitzvah include the other 42. But the approach to the Rambam Mishnah Torah is very different. Here in Sefer HaMitzvos, there's a mitzvah of ori miklot and a din to to set up the Ori Mikla for Ritzicha, for Rotzech B'Shoigeg, for the Klita. No mention that it's Ori Levim. The second mitzvah is Ori Levim, and Derech Agav, it's also Ori Miklot. In Mishnah Torah, there's a mitzvah lahafrish Ori Levim, as the Shemitah V'Yovel, and includes the Ori Miklot also. And in Rotzech Shmiyus HaNefesh, there's another mitzvah of Ori Miklot, and the Ori Levim are included because of a hektish. A very interesting thing. That is mitzvah Kuf Nun Daled, Kuf Pei Galad, Kuf Pei Daled. Now, Kuf Pei Hey. Just Derech Agav, he finishes B'Loshen Sifri. Excuse me. So sorry. Okay. Mitzvah Kuf Pei Daled. Kuf Pei Daled. HaMitzvah Cho Arba U'Shmonu U'Meya. Hi shetzivonu lohosir hamichsholim v'asakonis mikol moishveiseinu. To remove michsholim and sakonis from all moishveiseinu, wherever we live, or mishchuneseinu. That's the way Kapach has it. And the Ibn Tibbin is Lahosim Hamichsholim Vasakonis Mikol Moishveiseinu, and Kapach is Lahosi Hamoikshim Vamichsholis Michsholis Mikol Shchoneseinu. Now, I think irrelevant of whether it's Moishveiseinu, Shchuneseinu, the point is that the Mechayiv Shchuna or Moishav is a place where people live. Because the Mechayiv for Maike is based Dira. That's the Ram says, Notzech Shmiyus HaNefesh, Perek Yur Aleph, Halacha Aleph and Beis, Mitzvah Aseh, La Aseis Odom Ma'ake Legago. Shenever sees a Ma'ake Legagecha. Hu Shiyeh Beis Dira. Avo Beis Ha'oitzreis, U Beis Haboko, U Kietz Ve'enenu Zochot Loi. V'chule. Im Kein Lo Menega Gagecha, Lemayit Bote Knesiyos, U Bote Midrashos, Lefi She'enon Asuyim Ledira. You need not only a Beis Dira, but Asuyim Ledira. So this is the idea of Shmeiseinu, Shchuneseinu, that it is a Tnai in the Mechayiv, that the Mechayiv is only a Beis Dira. Now, this mitzvah is not a chiyuv. It's rishus. The Ram clearly says it. The pshat is that you're only chayiv if you have a house. Then you have to build a ma'akeh. The Ram says in Perek Yud Aleph with his brochos halacha beis, v'yesh mitzvah she'eino chayva ela doimin l'rishus k'goy mezuzah u'ma'akeh. V'chein eno chayev livnois bayis k'dei la'asos ma'akeh. And l'chayra, not only that, you need a gag. If you have a house and not a gag, you're also not chayev, or something like a gag. Now, and v'zeh in Ibn Tibbin and Kabbalah's v'hu, which is a little bit more readable. Shenivne, what is the mitzvah? Shenivne, how are you meisir the sakonos? V'zeh v'hu shenivna kleisasov v'agag. You have to build a wall around. V'sovev ha'boires v'asichin v'hadoim lehen. Kedei shelo yipol hanoifel and kapach and ibn tibin and hamistakim. Bohem. Someone shouldn't fall into them. This is a Maike. Or he says mayhem. You can have the opposite case of Nefila, that you're standing on some elevation, which is asot tvachim or whatever, and you fall from it onto something else, not into a hole. You're not standing on the ground. And then you have to build a mica around it. And that's bohem into the hole or mayhem from the elevation. A goiva. And that is like a gag. Bohem is a ball, and mayhem is like a gag. This first list, the Ram, there'll be a second list, we'll see. It's mekaymis that there's a sakon of nefila, either falling from something or falling into something. And the mitzvah is b'niyas maike bedafke, or it's certainly in an elevation. But if you're falling into a pit or something like that, kisir abo is also good enough to menei l'chshash nefila. And that's the Ram says in Perigir Aleph, Milchos v'Seichel Shmiras HaNefesh, Halacha Aleph and Dalet, Mitzvah say, Lasis Odem Maike Lagagoy, Shenemo v'Yasisa Maike Lagagecho, Echor Agag, v'Echor Kol Dovish Yesh Bos Akona, v'Roi Shi Koshel Ha'odom Boy v'Yomus, K'goyin Shoyisel Be'er O Bo B'Chatzeroi, Bein Sheyesh B'En Mayim, Bein Shein B'En Mayim, Chayiv Lasos Lohen Chuya Gavoya Asot Tfochim, O La Asois, that means like a Maike. O La Asois Lo Kisui, Kedei Shelipo Bol Odom Vyomus. We have to know, it's not for me, I don't really have anything to say about this now. Is there Birchas HaMitzvah only by Maike or also by Kisui of a ball? The Ram only talks there in Hilchos Brachos Perigir Avalocha Beis about Maike. The Rambam adds something over here. Kidei shelo yipol hamistaken mehem. Is that only a reason? Or maybe more than that? Maybe it's not a reason at all. It's a shurim in the wall. A wall has to be only such a wall that will support the person's body weight, that he won't fall into the ball or off the roof. And also, besides supporting his weight, has to be a certain size that he can't just trip over and fall in. The Rambam in Perek Yud Aleph of Hilchos Leitzeiach Shmiras HaNefesh, Halacha Gimel. Goiva ha'ma'ake ein pochos me'asot tfochim, kedei shelo yipol mehem ha'noifel. You need asot tfochim v'tzoch liyos ha'mechitza chazoko, kedei she'yishoyin odom oleho v'lo tipo. So you need both. It's a shurim in siluk hasakon. Now, let's go on. The second list. second list in Rambam, v'chein ha'makoimos, is also a list of places, which is interesting. We'll see about this. Makoimos ha'mesukonim v'horuim. In Kapach, it's Makoimos ha'sakona, just period. Kulam, all of them. Yivnu, either you have to build something, or you have to make a tikkun, v'yisuknu, ad sheyose ru'ah v'sakona, or the sakona, according to Kapach. You have to build something or make a tikkun. The sakona is not extant. The second Rishima, he doesn't talk about falling. There's a sakana, but this is the makoimos mesukanos, but there's no sakana of nefila. That also requires a tikkun or bniyah to misalat the sakana. And maybe this the Ram is talking about in Perik Yud Aleph Halacha Daled, v'chein kol michshol sheyesh bo sakonos nefoshes. He doesn't stress the mokim. Mitzvah say lishome mimeno lizoye bedova mi'oid yofa lizoye bedova yofa shenema hishoma lecho u'shmo nafshecho. And he says, Hishoma lecho u'shmo nafshecha. So there's shmira. And that's why he says, Ulizoye boy. He says, Ulishome mimenu lizoye bedovo. Because the mitzvah shmira. In Gag, where there's no mitzvah shmira, all you do is there's a binyan Micah, and that's it. It's not a shmira. We don't know b'chlal that in tikkun of these makoimos there's a bracha. Interesting over here in Minyan HaMitzvos, the Rambam derives both of these mitzvahs from the same pasuk. The binyan of Michael Kisi Abo Shelo Yipol Hanoifel Mayhem Abohem, and the binyan in Tikkun Fasoros Hasakona is all from the pasuk V'asisa Michael Lagagecha. As the Ram continues here. V'omrei yis'ale v'sisa Michael Lagagecha goes on everything. So now it's very clear that there's a different limud from the Rambam in Minyan HaMitzvos. He learns everything to Asisa Michael Agagecha, and in Mishnah Torah he learns the issue of Nefila from the pasuk of Asisa Michael Agagecha. However, when it comes to the mokim of sakona, not a sakona's Nefila, he says, or the issue when there's a sakona, which is not a sakonas nefila, he learns from Hishoma lecho u'shmo nafshecha. Now this is very odd. And offhand, it's ech k'mo l'chaykim imenu. Because this pasuk has nothing to do with anything. It's a pasuk about shichas matan Torah a priori. Rak yishom lecho ushmo nafshecho meyoid. Pen tishchach es advorim asher ro einecho ufen yosu levovcho kol yimei chayecho voidatam levonecho levnei vonecho. Dvorim per dalet pasuk tes. What is it to do with Mokum Sakona, with Sefer Shmuz and Nefesh? The Rambam commits the same, in italics, crime in Hilchos Sanhedrin. In Hilchos Sanhedrin, Perek Chavov, Halacha Gimel. Hamakal atzmoi, loike, kmo shekil lacherim. Shenema hishomer lecho ushmo nafshecho. Amazing thing. The Ram quotes this pasuk twice. Doesn't count it all in minyan mitzvahs, and it's the makor for Malchus in Mikal Atzmai, and it's the makor for the second type of mitzvah that is like Ma'akeh. And the Gemara seems to say that Hishomer is an Aseh and a Lav. And here he's making it to a mitzvah. The Gemara in Shavuos, Lama Vavam and Aleph, Hamakal Atzma v'chaveiroi, Am Rabbi Yanai, v'divrei hakol Atzmoi, Tichsiv Rak Hishomer l'cho shmo nafshecho meyoid, K'ru Rabbi Oven, Am Rabbi Lo, the Omer kol mokum shenema Hishomer, Pen v'al, Eino elo loisase. And here it's an Aseh. Not an Aseh. Min chaschinuch, mitzakuf tavkuf memvav, tzikoy mitzmincha. The Ram doesn't count. Hishom lecho shmo nafshecho minyan mitzvah at all. Hein legabe Maike, hein legabe Mekala. Then he adds something here in Mishnah Torah. Mitzasei lahasiroi ulihishome mimenu ulizoye bedova yofe yofe. What does this mean? There's no mitzvah nifredes over here. There's no separate mitzvah. There's no separate mitzvah in the minyan. How can you have din and shainim? So I have a suggestion. We'll see if it answers all the questions or most of the questions. The Ram's opinion is that Pshuto Shel Mikra is talking about the mitzvahs Talmud Torah. And the telling about Maim and Har Sinai is part of the mitzvahs Talmud Torah. The Ram quotes this twice, this pasuk, in Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph, Hilchos Talmud Torah, Halacha Beis and Halacha Yud. Shein shechayev odom lelamed es benoi, kachu chayev lelamed es ben benoi. Shnema voidatam levonecho levenei bonecho, bonecho levenei bonecho. Then Halacha Yud ad emosai, a shiurim in the chiyuv of mitzvahs Talmud Torah. Am emosai chayev lilmoi Torah ad yoim moisei. Shnema ad yoim moisei. Shnema ufen yesu milavovcho kol yimei chayecha. B'chol zman sheyasek shelo yasek b'limud hu shechech. So this is a shiur in the mitzvahs Talmud Torah. So my suggestion, as we mentioned before, the Rambam's opinion is that even though Pshuta Shamikra is the mitzvah's Talmud Torah, however, you can extend and expand a mitzvah through a drasha ba'alma and even nasmacht and a remes. And therefore, the mitzvah of loisikal cheresh is expanded through Hishomel Choshmo Nafshecha, and the mitzvah of Yasisa Michael Lagagecha is expanded. And the Ika mitzvah has to be Micah, otherwise you couldn't expand it. You can't start from a drasha. And therefore the minyan hakotza, and also in Motzei Shmiyas HaNefesh in the Prote mitzvahs, there's no mention at all of the second type of mitzvah. Last is Micah, Shem Asisa Micah Lagagecha. That's a minyan hakotza. In Prote mitzvahs, last is Micah. In Uchas Motzei Shmiyas HaNefesh, where you start mitzvah say last is, or the Micah Lagaga, Shem Asisa Micah Lagagecha. I'm not sure if it answers all the questions, but I think that the point is that the expansion of a mitzvah is, it could be not true to Shomika and a drasha. There's still issues that have to be dealt with, but let's leave it at the moment like this. Now, the Gemara Bakama and Tesvav Amud Beis says like this. Tisanya, Rabbi Nosson Oimer, Minayin Shali Gadol Odom Kelev, Ra, B'Seich Beisar, V'Al Yamid Sulam Ruah B'Seich Beisar, a dangerous ladder, a Kelev Ra, Talmuloima Loisosim Domim Beveisecha. It's not a mokum sakona, but there is sakona here. There's an isa to be machzik. Adov sheish bo sakona b'yushusa. And the third pasha of the Gemara is the makor is the ashara of loisosim domim beveisecha, and nothing to do with the mitzvah say. But the Rambam goes further. There's mechadish. There's not only ashara, there's a bitul mitzvah say. The Rambam in Hilchos Motzei Shmiyas HaNefesh Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Daled. V'chein kol michshol sheish bo sakonos nefoshes mitzvah say lo hasiroi uli shomer menu lizoyer b'dova yofa yofa shnei mishomer l'chol shmo nafshecha. V'im lo heisir v'niach michsholos v'vinu de sakona v'ito mitzvah say v'ova al lo yisomim dom v'secha. The mitzvah say it has to be the mitzvah of Micah. How does it get to the mitzvah say? Because of this remes in Yishom l'chol shmo nafshecha. Now, just an aside, the Ram quotes Kelev in. He doesn't quote it befuish in Hilchos Motzei Shmiyas HaNefesh, but he quotes a Kelev in Perek Hey of Hilchos Niskei Momen Halacha Tes. But you look over there, it has nothing to do with this. There, it's a Kelev Hamazik. It's not Mesukah. Here, if the Ram is referring to it over here, it's a Kelev Mesukah. And it's a ladder that's Mesukah. And Mesukah is in Hilchos L'Seichel Shmos HaNefesh. And Mazik in Hilchos Nizkei Momim. Now, I'm going to mention something which is tangentially, I think, very much negaya here. It's tangential. It's Yesod, which I must have said maybe 35 years ago, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. The Rambam in Hilchos and Halacha Daled, which Halacha Daled, I think because it is Din Shmira, Hishom Shmo Nafshecho, extends it, and Chazal were Oiser certain things which they might come to sakana, and they're not under the mitzvah. Dram Pergir Aleph Halacha Hey involved. How b'dvorim osru chachomim b'bnei sheyesh bohem sakonas milafoshes b'chol oive aleihem v'yom areini misakim b'atzmi u'mal acherim olai b'kach o eini makpid al kach makin oisim makis madis. A person who does not want to do shmira on his nefesh is makin oisim makis madis. And l'chayre, this makis madis is makin oishat shemaroitzani. The Elohein lo yaniach odom piv al asiloim hamakaleach hamakaleach mayim v'yishte v'yishte b'layla min ha'na'aris min ha'gomim shema yivla aluka v'ein oreya v'yishte mayim megulim shema shosa mehen nochosh u'kiyetz behem mizrich le'ofa v'yishte v'yomos. So I said that since the mitzvah is that Hishom Lecho Shmo Nafshecho, and that's where the whole discussion comes from. So therefore, Chazal said in similar instances like this, Shem Psoim Hashem, that where there's a mitzvah shmira, Hishom Lecho Shmo Nafshecho, sometimes a pesi can rely on the shmir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, this is only shmira from chashash sakona. Hishom Lecho Shmo Nafshecho. But where there's no chashash sakona, but there's a chashash choli, which is pegeya in your quality of life, in your ability to learn, your ability to interact with people for tzorkei aguf. There's a mitzvah lishmo midvorim elu from Darkei Hashem, from Derech Hashem, mi Darkei Hashem. And here there's no het of Hashem Psoim Hashem. It's nothing to do with Seichel Shmiras HaNefesh. And therefore the Rambam puts it in Hilchos Deis with the dinim of Darkei Hashem. And the Ram, there's no heteirim over here. In Gilui, before they were geyser, you could have said Shem Psoim Hashem. That's what we shouldn't say. After the geyser, you can't. But in Hilchos Deis, where it's Midakei Hashem and nothing to do with Shmira, but it's a mitzvah. As he says, Hoil and Perek Daled Locha Aleph Hilchos Deis, Hoil v'heyois haguf bori v'sholem midakei Hashem hu. Oh, that's Yechoiv, midakei Hashem, and that's why it's Hilchos Deis. Sha'ayev sheshiyovin or yeda miydias dova miydias haberei v'uchele. It's a steer to what people are living. Person, their life is all about another yidin, another yidin haberei, and he's not interested in this. V'uchele. to steer to the whole Bria and Derech Hashem. Lefikach tzorch laharchik odem atzmoi midvor ma'abdin es aguf ulehanig atzmo midvor hamavarin v'hamachlim. It's mefurish. It's two separate halachos. So the whole portion, the person sits down and has a meal or does something which is clearly not a contribution to his health, because the din is the fichotzoch lahachik atzmo man midvor ma'abdim es aguf ulahaning atzmo midvor ma'valines v'amachlimim. This is against the V'darkei Hashem. Now, next mitzvah. Just 1 second. The Ram at the end of this mitzvah quotes a Sefer. V'loshen Sefer v'yasisa Ma'akeh mitzvahs Aseh. It's not clear to me that he needs it, that you would have said that it's not a mitzvah had you not had this. And since there's a raya, maybe he quotes it. This has to be thought about. And I think there are many cases like this. Now, next mitzvah. Mitzvah Kuf Pei He. Shehi shetzivonu laabed avodah zora uboteihem kulam laabed avodah zora uboteihem kulam. So first of all, the avodah zara, the boteim is a very odd word, because the Rambam in all the other places has not a discussion, does not have a discussion about boteim. But besides avodah zara, the Rambam has something else which is more inclusive. The Rambam either has mishamseha or anase b'shvilo, something made for the avodah zara. Mishamsheho or anase b'shvilo. In mina kotzer laabed avodah zara v'chol mishamsheho. Shnemo avoid tovdunes kolam abed tabdunes kolam akemis. In the protei mitzvah nuchos avodah zara laabed avodah zara v'chol anase b'shvilo. There it's misham. Mishamsheri is nasa b'shvila, and in Mishnah Torah puts both together. In Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, mitzvah sehi laabed avodah zara umishamsher b'chol nasa b'shvila. Shnemo abed ta'abdun es kol hamakoimos. Kulam over here, that's Ibn Tibet in general. It's a little bit awkward. He likes to put the call, the ribui, at the end of the phrase. Avodah zara boteim kulam. Kapach translates it. Kol hanevodim, or the avodah zara uboteim. The call goes on everything. Because mechayiv, ibud, and hashchosa on any sug nevad, any sug avodah zara, and any sug bote avodah zara. Okay, now things are going to get interesting. He discusses various ways of destroying something, of destruction, of ibud and hashchosa. So the mitzvah is all avodah zara and batim, to destroy b'chol minei ibud v'ashchasa. And what are they? B'shvira, usreifa, v'harisa, v'chituch. Okay? So he lists various types of ways of destroying something. Very, very there's a lot of talk over here. Okay, all different types: shvira, sreifa, harisa, chituch. Then he has another phrase afterwards: kol min sheyaus, or as Kapach translates, roi, loy. What's loy ma shia yoser muflog ogomo? The destruction is more complete. V'yoser mamaher b'hashchasasai. The destruction is more complete, and it's speedier. So you evaluate the destruction of Avodah Zarah. You evaluate each case, what's the most expeditious and the total speedy destruction. And that's what you have to do. So, l'cheya, what he's trying to say is that which the Torah, because he's going to quote over here. Let me just quote the psukim so you understand. Vinita. 1 second. The psukim here. 1 second. Okay. Here's one of them, for example. It says like this. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. V'nitatztem es mizbechaisam, v'shibaltem es matzeboisam, v'ashereim tisvu be'esh, u'v'sile Eloheim tegadeun. Okay. Then another case. Ki'im. 1 second. Let me read the whole. Abei ta'abdu es kol maklim es ye'ovdu shom hagoyim asher yoshu moisam es Eloheim ha'olam u'rom v'agvoy sas kol yitzranon. Abei ta'abdu. V'nitatzen es dechois v'shivat es matzei moisam v'ashereim tisum be'esh v'silehem tegadeim v'bartem es shmom en hamokom hahu. Then in Dvorim Yud Beis, that's in Dvorim Yud Beis, Posuk Beis and Gimel. In Dvorim Zayin, Perik Hey, it says Ki Imko Tasu Lehem Mizbechoseim Titoitzu Matzevoisem Tishaberu Vasheim Tegadeun Uvsileim Tisufum Beish. So what it comes out is the Torah is just telling you what happens to be the most expeditious and complete destruction, and that's what you have to do. Okay, now, then it continues. We'll get back to this. Vakavona or Amatora es kapach. Shelo naniach lohem reishem. Nothing should be left. So we have to understand, is this Taimei HaMitzvos or not Taimei HaMitzvah? What exactly is happening over here? Okay. Then he quotes, and I think he means V'omru Gamkein Ki Eim Ko Tasu Lohem Is B'Choseim Titoitzu. Gamkein V'omru Gamkein V'Tatzim Is B'Choseim. Then we have to understand what happens following. Ubavur Sheniska B'Gemara the Gemara of Sanhedrin, Omram Mitzvah Aseh Avodah Zarah, Omru Atzara Tema Avodah Zarah, my Mitzvah Aseh Ika, V'Tirgumo Rav Chisda V'Nitatztem. So these ways of destruction, they're the mitzvah. Then he quotes at the end, V'Loshen Sifri, Minayin Atoimer. She'im kotzatz asher v'echlifo afilu Aseh pomim shechayv lekatzo tamlo ma'abei tabdu. What does he want from this? What's he trying to prove? V'yomu shom v'bartem eshmo men hamokom hahu be'eretz Yisrael ato mitzuva lirdof achreim v'ato mitzuva lirdof achreim b'chutz la'aretz. So here, there are two possibilities, and we'll have to finish the rest of it in Mitzvah Hashem next week. One possibility is simple, that this is another proof that there's a mitzvah. Because if Yechayev Lekatitzo, that means there's a mitzvah as a tzibur. Minayin ato mitzvah. Minayin ato imishim kotetz. Shechayev Lekatitzo. Tam haloyim abei tabdu. And also, v'bartem eshmo men hamokom hahu. And so there's a mitzvah. Or you can say, it's not a raya, it's a mitzvah. He's trying to explain what the mitzvah is. And it's a shurim in the mitzvah. So Mirz Hashem, what we're going to have to do next week is to compare and bli neder, contrast Mishnah Torah. Here in Sefer Mitzvos, there's a whole discussion about the hashchosa and ibud hayos ve'ayosim mamaher, the expedient and complete destruction. In Mishnah Torah, there's no mention of this. We have to understand what's going on in Mishnah Torah. We have to understand what is the relationship. Is there an emes and nas mitzvosai, and it's a gzeris hakosu that there's still an isano, as Tosfos says at the end of Tmura, or something else is going on over here? We have to know what kavanah shalaniach lehem reishem. Is it Taimei HaMitzvos or is it something else? I think if we know that, we'll be in very good shape. Okay, Hatzloch Rabba, have a nice week.